Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, it's May Revise Part 2. We are going in depth on the governor's announcement yesterday and how the numbers impact your school district.
The ACSA Legislative Lunch Break starts now.
And it's a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazweta, ACSA's Executive Director. I'm Naj ACSA Senior Director of Marketing and Communications. Welcome on a Wednesday. We're honored to have you with us. Go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello and let us know where you're watching from today. We've got so much to talk about with this May Revision Part 2, and we're going to tackle every piece of it coming up. Edgar, how are you?
Good. I kind of feel bad, but I'm going to blame it on you. I know pulling people together on Friday, getting people all excited, and then we didn't really have anything to tell them. But I think it was just your ploy to get a few more viewers here on the Legislative Lunch Break. So hopefully we're a little bit better. Still an interesting budget. This is a little bit different than what we've seen for those of us that have been doing this for a while.
Yeah.
I know Megan will make sense of all that for us, but some news better than no news, I guess.
You know what? And you've known this for the number of years you and I have been together here at ACSA, that I have like three favorite days here at ACSA: Budget Proposal Day, May Revision Day, and the day everything.
I knew that was coming.
I knew that was coming.
I knew that was coming. As soon as you started saying it, I thought of that picture, and sure enough, there it is again.
There it is again. It's like it's like it will haunt us for the rest of our time here at ACSA. But certainly May Revision Day on Friday was not the most exciting of days. However, May Revision Day yesterday gave us some more insight into public education. So go ahead and jump into our chat today. I know I saw Neri ask a question about UTK already. If you have questions, go ahead and drop those into the chat. Sheldon Smith, our first on the chat. I guarantee every single time we're talking about budget or anything fiscal, Sheldon is always the one who is first in the chat. So I wish that I knew exactly what time he got on the chat. When I went on 30 minutes ago, he was already
Sheldon's
there.
One who announced he's kind of in his next steps, and he's going to be one of those that, regardless of when he's retired or not, I have a feeling. I know he might be throwing in our face, being there in cool spots, right? I mean, his part of the state is not too bad down in San Luis Obispo as it is, but I fully expect that he's gonna keep tabs on what's happening here.
I would agree with you. So we're gonna go ahead and get right into this with the May revision. We kind of laughed a little bit about it on Friday, Edgar, during our special edition of the lunch break, because we normally have a lot to tell you, but on Friday we had a very slimmed down version of what this May revision looked like. Basically, it was a bit of an oddball. Yesterday, we received the details, and now we know what the governor is proposing and what lawmakers are going to have to work with. To address the nearly $9 billion public education shortfall, the governor is proposing to fully fund the statutory COLA and the local control funding formula that delivers funds for special education, adult education, school nutrition, and the equity multiplier, among others. However, the governor proposes draining the rainy day account and cutting funds to support inclusive preschools, which support students with disabilities. Noteworthy is this investment on electric buses, one that ACSA is very concerned about. The governor proposes to add more money to the program. He's doubling down on the investment, which includes money for buses and infrastructure. We'll tackle that in just a moment. That won't help many districts, especially at a time when the state is strapped for resources, and the focus really should be on the classroom. The governor says he does want to maintain the good work that's been done to protect public education up to this point, but figuring out how to handle Prop 98 and the entire education budget certainly isn't for a novice.
Yeah, a lot of stuff there, Naj. I think it's an interesting year. I know we were all kind of bracing to what this is going to look like. I think, as we always say, and I think again, Megan will help us make sense of what comes up next. But I think we're we're definitely not done with this, right? I think there's a number of variables. There's going to be some interesting political pieces given where some of the big groups have lined up. I know we've been in some of these conversations in terms of the use of 98 and how the governor's maneuvers. And so on some of this, even just some of the solutions. I know one of our questions that we're going to ask Megan, okay, we kept hearing these big numbers on how they're going to resolve that. Where does this stand? How's the legislature going to react? It's going to be a fascinating sprint here to the end as they adopt the final budget.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of time, Edgar, for them to, adopt a budget, to balance this budget and adopt it and get it to the governor's desk. But one thing that the governor did say about Prop 98, as I had just mentioned, is that it takes a higher level of education and understanding to really make sense of it.
You need not only a PhD, but you need a physics degree and engineering degree and everything else related to Prop 98 to unpack its complexities.
Yeah, so the governor says we need a scholar to figure out this whole budget, this May revision. So let's go ahead and bring in our scholar. Megan Baier is our ACSA legislative advocate and has, among other things, been completely focused on this budget now for several days. Megan, it's great to have you back here on the lunch break. We pulled you away from your work on Friday to talk about a May revision that was so slim. Now we're pulling you away because I know you were working late into the night to figure out all of the pieces of this puzzle with the May revision. So let's just talk about some of the particulars because I mentioned them in our open. What surprises you about the May revision, especially since the one released Friday was so small?
Yeah, this has been a really strange budget process year for us. We had this very slim, almost virtually no detail on Prop 98 that was given out on Friday. Then yesterday we received more detail, but typically we get these documents that lay out the governor's vision. He talks about, what his goals are, and then he lays out what his proposals are. And then we get technical documents that lay out the intricacies. This year, there were no summary documents. There was no overarching vision. We got the very technical documents, absent the context. So it's been a little bit like a scavenger hunt for us to try to piece together all these different items and going through the technical pages to work backwards to try to understand the bigger picture. So yeah, it's been a little difficult this year. And a lot of us in Sacramento are still trying to make sense of all of it.
Hey, Megan, I know one of the things that we kept talking about, we're looking towards in terms of those questions. What are going to be the pieces that we're going to keep an eye on when the information comes out? We always keep an eye on the big picture items like LCFF amounts, whether they're going to fund that. The COLA, I know, had been a big question there. So I don't know if it's surprising or not surprising. Like the governor's proposal is proposing to fully fund both, specifically the COLA. What do you think? Do you think that stays intact? I know there's questions about can they actually afford that? What's your sense given the information that we've gotten so far?
So it's interesting. They are funding COLA to LCFF and also the other traditional programs outside of LCFF. So like special education, nutrition, adult education, those programs that have usually receive the COLA are still getting it. In this budget context, it's certainly interesting. COLA to LCFF alone is about $1 billion, and we're in a budget situation where the governor is draining the entire $8.4 billion reserve. And then, he's also proposing new spending to one-time category. So, there's definitely some interesting choices here, and some of which we have concern about. In terms of COLA, it's really important to remember, especially declining enrollment, rising costs. So I think, happy to see it because we know districts need it. But yeah, I would say it's questionable whether the state can actually afford it, given that we're having to drain the entire Prop 98 reserve. So, it's an interesting mix of proposals.
And folks, if you have questions for Megan, go ahead and drop those into the chat. I see Neri's question that we mentioned earlier, and Julie Duncan from Region 6 also has a question. So we'll tackle that near the end. Megan, ACSA talks a lot about equity for all students, and I wanted to discuss this inclusive preschool situation. You've toured an inclusive preschool, and now the governor is proposing to cut funding to support these schools. First, to take our viewers into what an inclusive preschool is, can you talk a little bit about that? And then what do these cuts look like for this particular program?
Yeah, so this program, it's the Early Education Inclusive Preschool Program. It was funds that were designated to help preschools include students with disabilities into mainstream classrooms. So it's like facilities, it's inclusive playgrounds, toileting, right? Because you're talking about young children. And yeah, it's really amazing to see some of these programs that have been built out. The governor is proposing to sweep those funds and direct them to electric buses. I would also say, this is a rough budget for preschool overall. He's also pulling back the adjusted rate factors for preschools that serve. He had proposed to provide additional funding to preschools that are serving high percentages of students with disabilities. He's also pulling that back. So this is a rough budget for preschool and for students with disabilities, those younger students. Disappointed to see that.
Megan, you mentioned electric buses, which I know is, I say this in just like maybe one of the programs that might be the most popular, not unpopular, especially among some of our members, right? I know.
Edgar, I'm gonna butt in over here because I still have John Gray's predictions from last week, and the number 2 thing he said: cut green buses. So
yeah, and just to be clear, he wasn't necessarily proposing. He was
Right.
giving his analysis
His
of
prediction.
what that might be on the chopping block given the fiscal situation. But interesting enough, you just said, Megan, they're actually redirecting more funds there, right? And I know we've heard from our members that this is especially challenging in rural and small communities. What are you hearing from our membership on this issue? But then also maybe a little bit of pulling back the curtain, if you will. What's the administration's thinking on this program and diverting more dollars there?
So, I think this administration has really aggressive climate goals, which are laudable. And in a number of areas has been pushing, greening public agency fleets. Unfortunately, the reality on the ground for a lot of our members, and I see some of them on here, these vehicles don't work in every district. Even in flatter communities, there are major issues. There's mechanical issues that are not present with diesel buses. So the technology isn't really there for every district at this point in time. And I think there's a lot of concern, right? So the governor, he swept this inclusive preschool money. He's also taking money from the reversion account, the Prop 88 reversion account. So he initially had proposed $500 million for the electric buses. Now that is up to $895 million. Again, this is in the context that we are draining the entire Prop 98 reserve, right? So I think it's disappointing. And I will also say, these are Prop 98 dollars. I think in our mind, these dollars should be going to the classroom. These should be going to schools, and it's going to go to a grant program for buses that most districts are struggling to use. So yeah, disappointed, very disappointed. And hopefully the legislature is going to push back on that.
Yeah, and folks, again, if you have questions for Megan on particulars involving the May revision, go ahead and put those into the chat. Megan, I just want to follow up because you said that this was a rough budget for preschools. We talked about the inclusive preschools. That was your quote, rough budget for preschools. Any thoughts on why this has been such a rough budget for preschools, at least the May revision piece of it?
I don't know. It's really interesting to see. I think the governor had to make reductions somewhere, and I'm not sure why preschool seems to be taking, so much of that. This governor has been really great overall on investing in special education. He's done a lot to increase rates for special education. So to me, it's actually really surprising, and it kind of deviates from, I think, the values that he's demonstrated in past budgets. So, we'll have to wait to hear more. And, I think the legislature is going to have strong feelings about a lot of these proposals, and we'll be seeing in the next, tomorrow there's a hearing, and we'll be in hearings almost every day this week. So.
Yeah, Megan, another question from our members. I think Julie Duncan asked about, do we have any more information? Have we seen any announcements of sweeping the Golden State Pathway grants? And she notes that was looking for some info on that front.
I have not seen anything on sweeping the Golden State Pathways grant. So I think it's okay for now, intact for now, as far as we can tell. We are still making our way through a couple more budget documents, but yeah, as far as we can tell, it's intact.
We have this question in from Neri, Megan. He asks, any update on UTK staff ratio?
So no updates, no changes. Right now, the ratios are slated that we're currently in a 1 to 12 student to teacher ratio for TK. They are slated in 25-26 to go to 1 to 10. I think there's a lot of legislative intent to fund those ratios. And so, but we don't see that in the trailer bill at this point in time, a guarantee of funding, which is something that we are advocating for, along with a lot of our partners in Sacramento. Is we need assurances. People power costs money, especially going from a 24 child classroom to a 20 kid classroom. Like it really gets into the facility space as well.
I know this is an interesting budget, right? Because of the information. So I know you having to dig through the details. So hence, I think our members are just seeing, all right, all these different programs are there in the details. I think it was Cody who asked about the LRE block grants. And again, what are those cuts on the table? Kind of where are we at there?
So I think there's good and bad when it comes to this is the Learning Recovery Emergency Block Grant. It's like a mouthful, the LRE from a few years ago. There's good and bad news on that. So we're not seeing any more cuts to it. However, the state is, and this is the same from January, the state has been in a lawsuit regarding learning loss and how the state handled it. In order to settle that lawsuit, it's the Kayla J settlement, which, it's been covered a lot. EdSource has done a bunch of pieces, and I've seen other newspapers do pieces too, so you've probably read about it. But in order to settle that lawsuit, the state is putting new restrictions on how you spend those funds. So they're not going to take the funds away, but they are going to put new restrictions on the funds. You're going to have to do a needs assessment. There's going to be different reporting. It's going to have to go through your LCAP. That's going to start for the 25-26 school year, though. So this next upcoming school year, there's an acknowledgement of like the immediate planning, and to have to pivot for the fall would be very, very difficult. So those new requirements will hit in 25-26 and continue on.
Megan, Jeff Oakes, one of our loyal viewers here, makes mention, we'll go back to the green bus piece here. He says it's tough to charge a bus when PG&E puts you on an 18-month wait list to get a high voltage transformer required for level 3 chargers, which brings us to Rini Rickard's question. She's our board member, our ACSA board member from Region 13. She asks, is there sufficient electrical infrastructure to support electric buses? I see this as a huge concern in rural areas, which, Megan, we've talked about, small school districts, rural school districts. This is a really big hill to climb.
Both points, Jeff and Rini, spot on exactly our concern and what we've talked to legislators and the governor's office about. If you can even get on a wait list, right? And then the cost of, is PG&E going to pay for these upgrades to their own transformers? Is the school district going to have to pay for that? The cost to do all that. There's also just the electrical equipment in your school site for older school sites. Some districts are having to redo whole electrical systems or install completely new electrical systems. It's not as simple as, just throw the charger in there. It's the infrastructure costs are much, much greater than that. So yeah, these are great points. They're the points that we've been raising. We're very concerned about. And no, these things have not been solved. Districts are actively struggling with all of this.
Megan, we haven't stumped you yet, so I'm going to throw a couple more at you. Well, first of all, I wanted to point out, and Naj mentioned Rini Rickard, our newly elected incoming vice president for ACSA. Well, one day will be our ACSA president. So congratulations to Rini there in Region 13. I know we'll definitely have to get her on the show too.
That's
here,
right.
Soon, Naj. Going back to you, Megan. I think I saw the question. I lost it, but I think somebody was asking about community schools. Update there.
No cuts to community schools at this point in time. So community schools are okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I saw the other question about the emergency school closure.
Yeah, I was going to say your favorite topic. I was like, Megan's favorite topic here, the emergency closures. Go ahead and give an update there.
So just, for those that don't know, the governor does have a proposal from January that would require, in the event of an emergency school closure, such as there's a fire in your community. So you got to close the school down because there's evacuations, your power's down, whatever the instance is, you have to close school. Right now, there's a process by which you can go through with CDE. Your ADA, your funding does not get touched. The governor has a proposal that if your school has to close for an emergency for more than 5 days, you'd have to pivot to remote instruction or help kids enroll in another school district, or your funding would be cut. We have a lot of concerns about that, just given the nature of emergencies, the unpredictability. And we've been working, and thanks to a lot of members I see here who are part of LAD and other advocacy efforts to raise awareness and encourage the rejection of this proposal. But yes, it is still in his May revision. He did not pull it back. So we will continue working on this issue. And I would encourage you all, to the extent that you're doing advocacy work and talking to your legislators, to also please raise concerns about that emergency proposal.
Tammy Vaught, who may be a new viewer. I have not seen Tammy's name in our comment section before. So Tammy, if you are a new viewer, welcome. She asks, are there changes in universal meal program?
No, there aren't really too many changes. I think the thing that's really notable that we're seeing is the costs for the program continually are exceeding estimates. So current year meals exceeded the estimates. So the governor is having to put additional money to cover the costs, and then he's having to up the amount for next year as well. So right now the governor is fully funding the universal school meals, but it is really notable every time we go through this budget cycle, the demand is completely outpacing the estimates. So we have an eye on that.
Mm-hmm.
I think Naj, it's funny when he points out people. I think Naj has memorized every single person.
I certainly have.
Who's ever logged into the show. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, because they all ask me for the autographed 8x10 of you, Edgar. That's what it is.
Megan, longtime friend of ACSA, Marguerite Williams, asked about the ELOP extension. Yeah. She's welcoming the change, but wanted some confirmation. Can you tell us more on that front?
Yes, and I'm consulting my notes to make sure I get the years right. But so yes, the governor is making actually two changes to ELOP. So one, yes, Marguerite, I think your understanding is correct. Is that the governor's proposing that for funds for the 21-22 and the 22-23 school year, they need to be expended by September 30th, 2024. However, the other change that I just want to highlight and lift up for folks is starting in this school year, 23-24, you're going to have 2 fiscal years to spend your ELOP funds down. Previously, there was not a cap on how many years you had to spend it. And then I think the other thing, it's not a formal proposal yet, but the governor is expressing intent that, we're expecting a proposal forthcoming, that he wants districts to declare their intent on an annual basis if they're going to offer an ELOP program or not. And then it sounds like what they're interested in doing is for districts that are not going to run those programs, they're going to recoup those funds and then send them out to tier 2 districts. Those are the districts that are getting the much lower reimbursement rate for the ELOP program. So some acknowledgement that tier 2 rate is not adequate. And then going to be potentially putting new kind of declare your intent whether you're going to offer the program or not.
Megan, this question came in from Deb Rowe, and we talked a little bit about that inclusive preschools funding cuts earlier. But can you just reiterate that just for anybody who missed it about how the proposal in the May revision is to move that dollar figure over to a different program?
Yes. So I will just say that, so there's 2 proposals or potential, I guess, cuts to preschool. So one is it's the Inclusive Early Education Expansion Program, IEEEP is what they've called that grant program. And that was the grant program for districts could apply and then they could use it to update their facilities and do kind of like infrastructure related things to make sure that they could operate an inclusive preschool setting. Having more students with disabilities. So there was $250 million there. That money is being redirected to electric buses. The other proposal is the governor has been telling state preschools that they need to be making sure that they're setting aside a certain amount of slots for students with disabilities. So right now, preschools are supposed to be setting aside 5% of their slots. It was stated, and it was previous law, that over the next 2 years, they would go up, preschools would go up to 7.5%, and then 10% of their slots to be set aside for students with disabilities. The governor had also said that he was going to fund a greater reimbursement rate for those students to just help with the different higher levels of needs that they have. So the governor is both pulling back that funding commitment, and he's pulling back that requirement to go to a 7.5% or a 10%. So current law that preschools have to set aside 5% of their slots for students with disabilities is what will remain in effect, is the long and short of it.
Megan, I'm very impressed with all of the information you're sharing here. I wish I could tell you if all of it was accurate or not, but you know,
it is. Edgar.
No, I am so impressed with just the work you have been doing over the last couple of weeks and months, really, on this budget. I know we had our Ledge Action Day, and I love how you're making that connection to the pieces that are in there, and then also touching on those places where we have some more work to do, right? And just where our members in such good hands with you and the rest of the government relations team, just really following all the nitty gritty here with this ever changing landscape. Kind of one more question for me. I know, like, all right, so this has been unique. This is different than what we've seen before. What's next? What are we looking for? Where do we think those battle spots are going to be? What are you keeping an eye on here as we go to this next phase of the budget?
So the legislature is going to be holding a series of hearings. I think there's a hearing going on right now on different areas of the budget. There'll be the first education sub, I believe, will be happening tomorrow. So the next couple weeks, we're going to have a lot of hearings. Legislature is going to be in really tense negotiations with the governor. I expect that they are going to have a lot of concerns about, almost doubling this investment in green buses, which a lot of folks weren't a big fan of to start with. I think there is going to be concern along the same lines that we have around these investments in students with disabilities at the preschool level. And then the trade-offs here and the choices to make certain investments while also draining the reserve. So I think there's gonna be a lot of concern. ACSA will be weighing in and trying to influence the ultimate decision-making, and they will be working towards a June 15th budget deadline. I will say a lot of policy comes through what we call these trailer bills, which kind of get tacked on to the budget. And in recent years, those have come after June 15th. So we'll be following along and seeing if that indeed is the case again this year, and we'll be keeping you updated.
Yeah, Naj, you remember I gave you the piece that it said the other day, the feedback we got from the member, and
I was just going to make
you introduced Megan as a scholar, and I think if there was ever a day where making boring stuff interesting, I would give that accolade to Megan here today, is just not only giving us the information, but doing it in a way that our folks can understand it. So appreciate you, Megan, for everything today.
Yeah, the accolades, Megan, are plentiful on our chat today for you. And just for those of you watching, Megan is the only one who can explain numbers and this budget to somebody like me who knows nothing about numbers. So bless you, Megan, for your hard work over here. Megan Baier, our ACSA legislative advocate, our budget expert. Megan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And Edgar, this gives us the opportunity just to revisit a very important piece of news that happened at the end of last week, and that is the voting for our new ACSA Vice President, Renee Rickert from Region 13, our board member from Region 13. That is video of her from our Leadership Assembly being sworn in as our new ACSA Vice President. Edgar, I had an opportunity to speak with her and her fellow candidate, Catherine Castleberry, during our live candidate forum a few weeks ago. I think we're all very excited about new leadership every year. And I think Renee is really, really going to be a powerful leader here for our organization.
Yeah, I know she ran a tough race. We had two great candidates there, and that's always one of the beauty for us as staff. We know that whoever comes out victorious, that we're going to be in really good hands. And I've just appreciated hearing Renee's perspectives, what she learned about going across the state. Really, I think is part of this ACSA campaign. ACSA politics, no joke, right?
Yeah,
they traveled up and down the state, listening to our members, how we can be more responsive to all of these diverse needs that we have around the state. And I know she's going to make us better by even just sharing some of that she learned from our folks. So we're excited. We're excited for Rini, great representative. Another reminder of how fortunate we are to represent leaders like her. So it'll be a good couple years of getting to work with her here coming up.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just go back to the budget real quick, Edgar, because we've crossed the bottom of the hour here. 30 seconds. Your thoughts on all of this because of how unique this is. You've been involved at the budget at the district level over at LA Unified, now on this end here at ACSA for a statewide organization. This is a unique situation. How do you see all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Megan stated, this is unique. This is not, we usually don't get the information in the way we do. I think it's also unique just because of the changing landscape. I mean, I think big picture, some of it is like, okay, well, at least not yet. Things are not maybe as dire. Depends, right? There's definitely some risks there. So I think we're gonna have to just see how this plays out, how the bigger picture of even how they're composing this budget, how they're getting the structure of this like Prop 98 maneuvers. I think we're gonna have to keep an eye on all that. So that's why I said I think the other piece is them making the decision to kind of drain the rainy day fund and use all of that here this year, which they wasn't the original plan. What implications may that have here moving forward in future years? I think is something that we will all have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, everybody in public education will certainly have to keep an eye on that. Folks, if you like what you've seen, we invite you to like us on Facebook or subscribe to us on YouTube. When you do, you'll get instant alerts when we're about to come on the air with breaking news or for our regularly scheduled Wednesday show. Also, if you have great stories happening in your school districts, we want to tell those stories too. Go ahead and send your news releases, your photos, your bullet points to our great EdCal editor, Michelle Carl at mcarl@acsa.org. One other reminder for you folks, if you'd like what you've seen, but you're on the go, you can also listen to the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break on a podcast. We have those podcasts available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. Busy day, busy week, Edgar. Looking forward to seeing what the next steps are as far as the budget is concerned. Folks, thank you so much for being with us today on this live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.